Hello, folks. This is Dr. J. Smith, along with Hatun Tash. This is Dr. Rami Hussein Halaseh, a good friend and a scholar who is probably best known for this book right here. And this is what we're going to talk about, this book. The Topkapı Qur'ān Manuscript, HS 32. Dr. Rami Hussein Halaseh is probably the one who has unpacked this manuscript, and we're going to talk about this manuscript. It's there in Turkey, in Istanbul, because it's the manuscript that the Muslims point to as the best preserved and the most complete, and one of the earliest manuscripts. And so we've asked Dr. Halaseh to come along to throw some questions at him. We will be really zeroing in on this. This is an academic exercise. We're not going to ask him to interpret what or how to use this in a context of on the streets when we're engaging with other people, but mainly as an academic. What has he found? What does he know? How is it that we can look at this book? Can we date it? Can we find some problems with it? Are there difficulties that we need to know about? Now, listen, we can look at this book and not understand a word of it, but he can, because he is a native Arab speaker. And as a native Arab speaker, he understands not only the Arabic, but he also understands the English translation of it. So I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Hatun Tash. She has some questions to throw at Rami. And from there, we'll just come back. I'm going to sit and listen and then throw some auxiliary questions that I may have on this. Over to you, Hatun.
Thank you. Dr. Halaseh, thank you very much for joining us. We really appreciate the work you put together regarding the Topkapı manuscripts. I had a privilege to read it. I must say I am amazed. I think I will start with the $1 million of question. So if I understood correctly, this is the manuscripts which supposed to have the blood of Uthman in it. Would you kindly tell us, did you get to see blood of Uthman in this manuscript, and how that blood end up in this manuscript?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Dr. Jay and Hatun. Yeah, so this is kind of the lay people claim toward this manuscript, is that it has the blood of Uthman in it, and this goes back into some early literary sources. Well, not really early, but some literary sources that say that while Uthman was reading in the Quran, in his mushaf that he collected, people came in and they killed him. In Kitab al-Masahif al-Sajistani, he says that parts of his blood, Uthman's blood, fell on a verse in the Quran. And I mention here this in more details, but what the claim has come to be that this is actually the manuscript that Uthman was reading when he was assassinated. And those, I'm trying to pull it up, and those blood stains can be seen on folio 12B over here. And so the claim is that this is the blood of Uthman. So this is the Uthmanic mushaf, and it's the most reliable, the most complete, often people say. However, in my study, I did not find this to be a reliable piece of information. It does seem to me like something, just a folklore, religious idea, rather than any idea or any proof supported this claim. This does not seem to be a blood stain. In my research, I have come to the conclusion that it's most likely humidity. And even if we want to say that it's blood claim, there are some literary sources that affirm my conclusion that it's not blood, and they say that even if it's blood, it has been added later to give some religious value to this manuscript. So short answer to your question is no, I did not see any blood in this manuscript.
So I'm hearing from you. So I'm involved with Christian evangelism, and what I'm hearing from you is the blood which Muslim tells us this manuscript goes back to Uthman because it contains the blood of Uthman, according to your research, actually might not be the blood of Uthman, or it might be just a stain edited later.
It's definitely not the blood of Uthman. It could have been added later if it's blood, but it's definitely not the blood of Uthman, because for it to be the blood of Uthman, this manuscript had to date roughly toward the end of his reign. So I would say, a little bit around 650 to the time of his death. And from my research, this is not the case by any means. So it's definitely not the blood of Uthman, and it's not the Mus'haf that Uthman was reading in when he was killed, if that account is historical.
In that case, I guess my follow-up question would be, since the death of Uthman is 656, what is the date for the manuscripts? Would you say it's like somewhere in 7th century or much later?
So yeah, so that was one of the challenges in studying the manuscript. And as you both know, dating a Quran manuscript is a daunting task. It's not an easy thing to be done. Sadly, manuscripts don't come with a date in front of them, not all of them at least. And I wish we had like a reliable colophon where it says that, hey, this manuscript was written by this such and such person on such and such date. And finding a way to do that, it's not an easy way. So I think what I did is that in my analysis, I looked into all the factors that includes the codicology, how the codicology is the science that studies how the book is structured, right? So I looked into the codicology, I looked into the paleography, how the letters are, the shapes of the letters, the orthography, the spelling of those words, some other factors, and I put them together also with the variants, with the variant readings of the Quran. So to reach to a point where this manuscript was written during the Abbasid period, produced roughly toward the second half of the 8th century AD. And that's why I said it's definitely not the blood of Uthman, because Uthman had been dead for almost 100 years at that point.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dr. Halaseh. Would you be kind enough to take us a little bit back? How, at the first place, Quran ended up in the time of Uthman?
Before we go on, can I just do a follow-up question to this? You are aware that there's another manuscript that also has a blood stain. That would be the Samarkand manuscript.
Mm-hmm.
Both claim to have the blood of Uthman. Obviously, either he had multiple manuscripts around him that the blood was spilled onto, or this is much the same practice. They're trying to give authority to that manuscript, which is in Samarkand, authority to this manuscript, which is now placed in Topkapi. If you can claim that the blood is there, is what you're saying, this would then say that this truly was from the time of Uthman. That's why you're saying this is probably a later claim.
Yes, definitely. That's what I'm trying to say. And the reason that I think it's the Topkapi that people often refer to is that during my research, I have found some literary sources that talks about the man coming from Iraq to Cairo, and he had in his hands, and I mentioned that all in the book, and with him, he had a manuscript that had the blood of Uthman in it, and that was the claim. And people in Egypt celebrated that until the 19th century, when it was moved from Cairo to Istanbul, Turkey. And that's why it looks, to me, it makes more sense for this to be the case. And we should not be surprised by if people truly did that, added blood to manuscript. We should not be surprised, because they want to give more religious value and to give more honor to what they have, in claiming that we have a manuscript that Uthman himself, the third caliph, was reading. That is the ultimate honor for any person to have such a manuscript. But yes, you are right.
Also, I guess that will give authority to the scripture from the Muslim perspective.
Absolutely. And
yeah, I was just saying, Christians have done this as well. We have this with the letter from Muhammad that is in the St. Catherine's Monastery, where they have a handprint or a hand itself of Muhammad on it to give authority to prove that this was written by Muhammad himself. So this is quite normal. This is quite natural. This happened both by Christians and Muslims. In that case,
That's
that
right.
was the 17th century. So even as late as the 17th century, they were still doing this practice. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, I was gonna I was gonna ask you to, if you can take us a little bit back, maybe 30 years before the death of Uthman. So, if I understood correctly from the Islamic tradition, it looks like you are mainly focused on the history. After Allah revealed Quran to Muhammad through angel Gabriel, Muhammad didn't write anything down. People around him put together the Quran. Can you kind of take us back to that time, to time of Muhammad, time of Uthman? How did we get the copy of Uthman from Muhammad to Uthman?
Yes, I can. And definitely we don't have a copy from Muhammad to Uthman, but I will lay that out right now. So literary sources, let's start with Muhammad, because in textual criticism, and when we study the history of the Quran, we are not really thinking about the whole idea of inspiration and the point between God and Muhammad. We don't talk about that, because that's not the question that we are asking ourselves. So we will start with the Prophet of Islam. So the Prophet of Islam claimed that he had a revelation, and he started producing or giving or passing along scripture that he received, and people start memorizing those pieces of scripture. They started writing them down. Literary sources tell us that they were written on palm trees, on stones, on bones, on leather, and they were circulating among Muslims, both in written format and in oral tradition, both of those together. Now, the first critical point comes after the death of the Prophet, and as a response to the death of the Prophet, some Arab tribes that they embraced Islam during the time of the Prophet decided to leave Islam, and as a sign of that, they stopped paying the taxes to the central government. So when this happened, the historical account tells us that there was a war that took place, or a battle called Ma'arakat al-Yamama, the Battle of al-Yamama, during which many of the people of the Huffaz, the memorizers of the Quran, those that they memorized the Quran, many of them died. So Umar ibn Khattab, the second caliph, so caliph is basically a leader, right? Islamic religious leader. So we have Prophet Muhammad, then we have Abu Bakr, the first caliph, Umar, the second caliph, and Uthman, the third caliph, right? So what later would become the second caliph, Umar, came to Abu Bakr and told him, listen, a lot of people are dying, the people that they have memorized the Quran, so we better write down the Quran, unless, because if more people die, we might lose parts of the Quran.
Yeah.
And after hesitation from Abu Bakr, he decided to go ahead and write the Quran. So he asked Zayd bin Thabit to go ahead and collect the Quran, and that was what most people agree upon to be the first collection of the Quran. Now let me stop here and say that other traditions attribute the first collection of the Quran to Ali. They say Ali is the one who collected the Quran, but it was rejected later by Abu Bakr. So there was the collection. That codex stayed with Abu Bakr. Then when he died, went to Umar. Then when Umar died, which is interestingly, it went not to the third caliph, but it went to Umar's daughter, Hafsa, and it stayed with him. So that's the Quran all the way to Uthman. Now, at the time of Uthman, literary sources tell us that people in Central Asia, Muslims in Central Asia, in their expansion and the expansion of the empire, started disagreeing with each other over the Quran. Now, we don't know exactly the nature of the disagreement, whether it's in the text itself or only the recitation, but we know two things. The first thing we know, that it was substantial enough to threaten the unity of the whole empire, because people start calling each other infidels, kafir, over that disagreement, right? So it was substantial enough that people that it threatened the unity of the empire. And the second thing, it was substantial enough in its in its nature that it required that the third caliph to get involved and destroy all other manuscripts. And as you know, at that point, now given we're talking about the collection of Uthman, so assuming that was the case, that Uthman indeed is the one who did it, at that point, most of the Arabic text was without the dots, without the fatha, shadd, dhamme, the ba and ta, noon, they were like each other. So it seems to me that it was actually in the consonantal text, not only in the pronunciation.
So Rami, just real quickly, we have to engage with Muslims on this all the time, and one of the comebacks they always give is that this is nothing more than dialectical differences. What you're saying, really, real quickly here, is this is actually this has nothing to do with dialectical differences. If you could explain, as an Arab speaker, what we mean by dialectical differences, that the need for dialectical differences requires the vowelization. If you could help us with that, just explain that, so that this is nothing. This is continental differences.
So in Arabic is different than English, right? So in English, if you want to say can, it's C-A-N. That's it, right? But in Arabic, you have what we say the skeletal text, that is the letter, but also in the letters, usually there are two things that comes with it. The first one, there are the dots. And I talk about this in chapter 3. There are the dots that differentiate between the noon and the ta, between the n and the t, right? Both of them, they look the same almost. But if you have one dot, that would be a noon. If you have two dots, that would be a ta, right? So you might be able to read the text without those dots, but those will make it more clear, right? And the second thing, you have the harakat, which is the short vowels. Now, when it comes to dialectical differences, those are, in some capacity, are related to the short vowels, right? So you can read a word with a fatha, a sound short vowel, or with a kasra, kind of a e sound short vowel. Those are dialectical. Now, what I'm saying is that the disagreement, we don't know exactly the extent of this disagreement. It can be, or it can have been just simply differences in the dialects. However, it does seem to me that this is not the case, and it's unlikely, because dialects are often not reflected on paper at that point. Because if dialects are connected to the short vowels, and short vowels did not exist in the masahif at that point, so it becomes really difficult for the differences to be dialectical only. So it must have been something deeper than that. And it does seem to me that it has something to do with the actual wording of the Quran more than the differences, now the dialects. Now, it might be only dialects, or it might be only short vowels, but it's very unlikely. It could be short vowels, dialects, plus wording itself.
So
Let me just go follow up on that. Is it not true when Al-Bukhari is referring to this in volume 6, volume number 6, sorry, hadith number 510, he doesn't say vowelization, he doesn't say diacritical, he says differences in the meaning. So obviously the fact that it had differences in the meaning, because they were hearing it different when they were there up in Azerbaijan after the battle.
That's
Hudayfa,
right.
who is hearing it being recited in the mosque after the victory of Azerbaijan, he was hearing those from Iraq and those from Damascus were reciting it differently. That would be dialectical differences. That's a recitation that they're saying orally. But when he came down to Medina and confronted Uthman with this, saying we must be careful that we do not have different Qur'ans, that would be a written text. So we're talking about a consonantal text, because the diacritical marks had not yet been created, nor the vowelization been created in 652.
That's correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
So that's why
that
people
would
are
be
confusing this when we get into a discussion. We're really talking about a consonantal text here, aren't we?
Yeah, most likely. Also, literary accounts don't actually talk about dialects, right? When they talk about that particular incident, they say that there were differences, but they don't, at least in Azerbaijan, right? They don't claim that those are only dialectical. So it's up to your interpretation. But considering the bigger picture of the history of the Quran and the existence of different codices and different companion codices, which we can talk about more if you want, there is absolutely no reason to reject the idea that there were actually consonantal differences that they were disagreeing on.
Just the
May I just push this one step further? In your opinion, though, Rami, if this is simply oral differences, as that's what we seem to see from the reference to Bukhari, that would not impact on the consonantal text. Am I correct?
You are correct, and it would not require the collection of different manuscripts and burning them.
Bingo.
Why would you burn something that?
So if you're burning a manuscript, you're burning a consonantal text difference.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. That's what I wanted to hear.
Just a thought on that topic. So, what we see from Islamic tradition is the war taking place in Azerbaijan was calling. You also expressed that making Muslims to call one another as kafir. Therefore, there is an approach to Uthman. Let's compile in one way so that we don't divide it as Christians and Jews are divided about their books, and we know the differences on that. And we look at the Islamic tradition as it goes on, we get to see there are different, something called Qur'an. And when you engage with Muslims, a general response to that is, oh, they are just their critical marks. They are just vowel differences, and it doesn't change that much meaning. That's different argument. But if you are going to make a case regarding there is a high possibility, the reason Muslims are calling one another kafir, disbelievers, in the time of Uthman is razm, must be razm, because this the Qur'ans kind of shows us vows are not that much, I don't want to say not important, but they were not they are not even today causing Muslims to call one another disbeliever, right? Do I make sense?
Yes, you do make sense. And I'm not saying it must be Rasim. I'm saying it is most likely Rasim than the Qira'at. And now and when we say Qira'at, the English term, which I don't really like to use, but it's a textual variant, right? That's taken from the New Testament field of textual criticism, but I don't think it's very accurate to call it variant. But the comeback to that would be that at that point people were not very aware of the concept of qira'at, and they were some might say that they were unauthentic qira'at being said. That's why they're calling each other kafir. But I still think that the differences had to be more substantial than just mere dialectical differences among people who already knew those dialects.
The Qira'at, if you look at the dates of all the Qira'at writers, they don't even begin to appear till 736. We're talking about another almost 80 years.
The eponymous readers and their rawis, that's right.
That's right. They're much, much later. They're 8th, 9th century, even up to the 10th century. We're talking about the 7th century. And in the 7th century, there are no Qira'at yet, because the dots and vowels had not been unified. There were some dots being introduced, but there was no unification on what the dots meant, and the vowelization comes later anyway. So really what we're talking about is consonantal text in the 7th century.
Yes, but in oral tradition, again, I'm trying to be fair in the way that I in my assessment of the situation. But the qira'at can be transmitted orally, not only on text, right?
Understood.
On paper.
We're
orally.
So oral now. We're talking about written. Yeah. We're talking about written text now. That's what they're burning.
So written text, you are right. Yeah.
You burn written text.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So just I'm really underlining, because this is something a lot of Christians get mixed up with as well when we talk about this, and Muslims are always, they don't. Let me just give you an example. Even today, if you go to Cairo and you get a newspaper in Cairo, a lot of times they'll leave the vowelizations off, because they want people from Jordan and from North Africa to buy their newspapers, and then they put their own oral dialectical differences when they read it. But the consonantal text is unified. Am I correct?
That's right. You are correct. Yeah.
Okay, and that's why even in the 21st century, we still have this problem. But people who don't understand Arabic don't understand this. But you understand Arabic.
That's right. And I often can, I don't need those short vowels to be there to know it, but I do need the dots to be there to be able to.
The dots you need, and even the dots were not really unified in the 7th century either, were they?
No, at that point they were not there yet. So
yeah. Okay. Which is fascinating because the earliest manuscripts that we do have, including your Topkapı one that you're an expert on, there are a few dots being introduced in the Topkapı, but they are not in all the letters and in all the words.
That's right. That's right. And to continue just with the sequence, since we already started on that, Dr. J. So when this disagreement happened in Azerbaijan, they came to Uthman, and Uthman decided, he said, listen, I'm going to unify all the Ummah, all the Islamic nation under one codex, one text, and we'll call it. So he collected, he commissioned a committee, interestingly enough, led by Zayd bin Thabit, and it had the sons of law of Uthman. And he excluded.
That one more time so people hear that.
Sorry, just a clarification question. So while Uthman is ordering Quran to be rewritten, he puts the committee together, and those committees are member of his family, his son-in-laws, and Zayd bin Thabit. Are those individuals the ones which Muhammad pointed to people, or where were they in the time of Muhammad when it comes to the memorization of the Quran?
Yeah, so that's the same question that Ibn Mas'ud asked about the Zayd bin Thabit, and he said Zayd bin Thabit was still a little boy when I was memorizing the Quran. It's very interesting that the committee excluded all the senior companions that existed during the time of Uthman, and there are so many questions about that particular case. First of all, if Abu Bakr already collected the Quran, why did we need to collect the Quran again, right? Yeah. And we know that Hafsa, who's the daughter of Umar, already had that copy, and that's proved by the account that says that Uthman went and asked for Hafsa's copy of the Quran. So if Uthman already or Abu Bakr already collected the Quran, why did we have to collect it again? Was it incomplete? Was it somehow a disagreement between Uthman and Abu Bakr over it? What was the reason for that? But anyway, no matter what the reason is, which people have and scholars have different interpretation of that, many different interpretations. But no matter what the reason is for this, the story goes on to tell us that once this Quran was collected, we ended up with this mushaf that Uthman thought that it's the right mushaf, and he made copies of that. Now this is what's becoming more confusing, is that he made those 4 or 5 or 8 copies of the Quran, and he sent them to the different amsar or region, like big cities around them. But even in those codices, there are differences in the rasm. So Ad-Dani later, like 400 years later, he comes and tells us that there are at least 44 differences in the Uthmanic codices, between the Uthmanic codices, right? So those are not major paragraphs or verses, but wow and like wa taht, like still differences between them. And some accounts tell us that Uthman, when he saw the Masahif, he said that it has lahin, it has something grammatically that is not normal. I don't want to say wrong, but not normal grammatically. And his response to that, the Arabs will correct it. So if your goal is to unify the whole Ummah under one codex, one primary text, why did you allow those differences to exist in the first place? And let's say that, okay, it happens, it exists. Like, sometimes you spend years on a book, writing a book, then when it's published, you realize you had a few typos here and there. But this is not any book. this is a major book, and the perfect preservation of the Quran is a major doctrine to Muslims today. But yet we have those differences, right? So,
before we get into that, Rami, we are at 30 minutes. We do want to bring this episode to a conclusion. Let's just review quickly what you have said. I think one of the things that I'd like to bring forward is for the Uthmanic recension, what we do know, looking at what you're going straight out of the Islamic tradition, you're getting out of this from Al-Bukhari, volume 6, hadith number 509 and 510. 509 would be the first recension, as we call it, 632, 634 recension by Abu Bakr, and then 652 would be roughly 20 years later would be the second recension under Uthman. So those are the two recensions. One was after the Battle of Yamama in 632, and the other one was after the Battle of Azerbaijan in 652. So roughly 20 years apart. And you're saying that at that time, and correct me if I'm wrong, Rami, you're saying that even as late as 652, so you have consonantal text that disagrees. This has nothing to do with dots and vowels. It's nothing to do with diacritical pointings or the vowelizations. These are actually consonant, the razm, the 16 letters that existed in the 7th century. At this time, 652, there were different razms. And at that point, at this time, just correct me if I'm wrong, it was Uthman that ordered all the ones that disagreed. Now we're talking about consonantal disagreements, not vowelization, not dialectical differences. These are actual words that change, that differed from what was already in the Abu Bakr first recensions. They had to be destroyed. So that's as far as we've got. Come back on me and just in your concluding remarks. Is that what we can agree upon so far?
we definitely can agree on that. I think you are being kind in your evaluation of the differences between in the Rasim and between the different codices. I think the differences were more extensive than that. Maybe there were differences in the codices that Uthman sent out, that's for sure, but we cannot afford to ignore the companion codices, which is a whole different ballgame. The differences there were much more severe and more important, I think.
Okay.
Questions, but can I ask a clarification question on the story you mentioned, how as they are compiling, as Uthman ordering people to compile the Quran, where he puts his in-laws in charge of it. In that conversation, it talks about if you disagree, then write it in Quraysh dialect. And if I understood correctly, you said for dialect to exist, we need vowels, and they don't have vowels. So what is that, like, write it in Quraysh dialect means in that hadith?
I think that needs more impacting in that aspect, and we can talk about it more.
Can we bring
but there
that
are
up in the next episode? That's a huge question. I mean, this is something that we've dallied with for over 20, 30 years. We asked this of Muslims way back in the 1990s, and they could not answer this. This is a huge question. Let's start with that in the next episode, if you don't mind. So stay on. We have an awful lot to do. There's an awful lot of really juicy stuff yet to come out, because those of us who actually engage with Muslims, we need an academic to really make sure that what we're saying is academically sound. And that's why we've asked Dr. Halaseh to come up and we're not going to push him to come to the same conclusions we come to, but at the same time to make sure that we are academically correct in what we are assessing. So God bless you. Thanks so much, Rami. It's so good we were just with each other a few weeks ago. Now it's great that we're able to do so even thousands of miles away with this technology. Until next time, this is Hatun and Jay and Rami, over and out.